Welcome to Parenting Masterclass, Raising Thriving Kids as Future Leaders, the podcast dedicated to equipping parents with insightful strategies, practical tools, and inspiring stories to navigate the rewarding journey of nurturing their children. In each episode, we explore a unique topic, diving deep into books, expert advice, and real-life experiences to provide you with actionable steps to help your kids thrive. Today's episode is particularly special as we delve into the book Helping Your Anxious Child, a step-by-step guide. This invaluable resource, authored by Ronald Rapee and his team, offers practical strategies to help parents guide their children through anxiety and develop confidence and resilience. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, share it with fellow parents, and leave a review if you find this episode helpful. Your support helps us reach more parents and make a difference together. Now, let's uncover the key takeaways, discuss actionable tips, and explore how you can apply these strategies to empower your child and help them navigate life's challenges with courage and self-assurance. Let's get started.
Welcome back, everybody. Today's deep dive is all about helping those anxious kiddos out there.
Oh, every parent's favorite topic, right?
Yeah. Well, hopefully this one can provide some actual strategies that folks can use.
Fingers crossed.
So we're diving into Helping Your Anxious Child. It's a step-by-step guide for parents, and it's written by like a whole team of experts. Ron Rapee, Ann Wignall, Susan Spence, Vanessa Cobham, and Heidi Linehan.
A whole crew.
Yeah, and they're trying to give parents evidence-based strategies for dealing with anxiety in kids.
Because we all need that, right?
For sure. Before we go any further, though, quick reminder to subscribe to the Foresight Technologies Innovation Hub YouTube channel. We do more book reviews and summaries just like this one. Now, let's actually talk about the book.
Sounds good.
So, when you first start reading it, it really hits you how common anxiety is with kids.
Yeah.
They give a bunch of examples, like Emily, who's 12 and terrified of the dark. Or Connor, who's 10 and just freezes up, like paralyzed by shyness at school.
So common.
Right. And it's kind of reassuring in a way, just to know that anxiety is often a normal part of growing up.
It's not something to be scared of, right?
Right. The goal isn't to totally eliminate anxiety, because that's not realistic. It's about teaching those kids how to deal with it.
Give them the tools. Exactly. And the book really hits on that. It's not about waving a magic wand and poof, anxiety gone. It's about giving kids strategies they can use.
Okay, so chapter 1, they jump right into understanding what anxiety actually is. And they talk about how anxious kids, they fall into these thought traps.
Thought traps, huh?
Yeah, like they overestimate how likely something bad is going to happen, or they just totally blow the consequences out of proportion if it does.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so to tackle that, they introduce this concept of realistic thinking. They call it detective thinking sometimes. It's like teaching kids to become little anxiety detectives.
I love that.
Right? So how do you become a detective of your own anxiety? I'm intrigued.
Well, they talk about gathering evidence. Just like a real detective, you got to ask yourself, what's the evidence that this bad thing is actually going to happen? And, what else could happen instead?
I like that. So it's about looking at the facts.
Exactly. They learn to challenge those thoughts with logic and, with facts.
Instead of just getting swept up in the what-ifs.
Yep. And they give you all these questions and activities you can actually do with your kid.
Oh, wow. So it's not just theoretical.
No, it's very hands-on.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
So besides detective thinking, what else do they cover in those early chapters?
Well, they talk about this technique they call step ladders.
Step ladders.
Yeah, it's a way to help kids face their fears little by little. You start with small steps and keep building up from there.
Okay, so what's that look like, a step ladder in real life?
Okay, so let's say you have a kid who's terrified of dogs.
Woof.
Right. So the first step might be just looking at a picture of a dog. Then, maybe watching a video of a dog playing.
Okay, so baby steps.
Exactly. Then maybe looking at a dog through a window. Each step gets them a little closer to their fear at their own pace.
It's like a ladder towards bravery. Each rung gets them a little higher.
Exactly. And the book stresses how important it is to celebrate those little wins along the way.
So parents are like the cheerleaders in all this. Now, I know parents, we try our best, but sometimes we can actually make things worse without even realizing it. Does the book address that?
Oh, yeah, for sure. They have a whole section on those unhelpful coping strategies that parents often use.
Oh, no.
We think we're helping, but sometimes it backfires.
Okay, like what? Give me an example.
Well, they talk about giving excessive reassurance.
Oh, I'm guilty of that one.
Like when a kid's worried and we just keep saying, don't worry, it's all going to be fine, over and over.
But doesn't that make them feel better?
In the moment, maybe. But what we're really saying is you can't handle this on your own.
Ooh.
And over time, it can make them more dependent on us and less confident in themselves.
Okay, so it's about finding the right balance. Supporting them, but also encouraging them to develop their own skills for coping.
Exactly. And another big one they talk about is accommodating avoidance.
Accommodating avoidance.
So let's say the kid's scared of dogs, right?
Sorry.
And we always cross the street to avoid them. Or we never go to the park because there might be dogs there.
Oh, I see.
We think we're keeping them safe.
Right.
But really, we're preventing them from learning to deal with their fear.
So it's sending the message that the fear is something to avoid at all costs, rather than something they can eventually learn to manage.
Exactly. And the book gives you different strategies, much better strategies, for how to actually support a child in facing those fears head on.
Instead of just shielding them from them.
Right.
This is making me rethink some of my parenting choices for sure.
It happens.
Okay, so we talked about thinking traps and step ladders and those unhelpful coping strategies. What else really jumped out at you in those early chapters?
Well, they spend a lot of time talking about social skills.
Which makes sense, because social anxiety is so common.
Oh, yeah. And they talk about how to coach your child.
Hmm.
And things like how to start a conversation, how to make eye contact, how to read social cues.
Those are things that even adults struggle with.
Right. But the book breaks it down into really specific steps. And they even give you scripts and role-playing exercises. So it's very hands-on.
I love that, because it's one thing to know what your kids should be doing.
Right.
But it's a whole other thing to know how to actually help them get there.
Exactly. They don't just tell you what to do. They show you how to do it.
That's amazing. And I know this is a hard one, but they talk about dealing with teasing and bullying too.
Right. They do. And they acknowledge that, anxious kids, because they're often quieter and less assertive,
Right.
they can become targets.
Oh, it's heartbreaking to think about a kid going through both anxiety and bullying at the same time.
Yeah, it's tough. But the book gives strategies for dealing with it. For both parents and kids, they talk about teaching kids to be assertive, to stand up for themselves.
Okay. To solve problems and to ask for help from adults they trust.
So it's about empowering them, showing them they don't have to go through this alone,
Exactly.
and giving parents the tools to advocate for their kids, especially at school.
Exactly. And to work with teachers to make sure the school environment is safe.
It's like giving you this whole toolkit for navigating all those tricky social situations.
Exactly.
I like that. Now, you mentioned earlier that the book uses case studies to illustrate all this.
Yeah.
I always find those really helpful. It makes the concepts feel so much more real.
Right.
So tell me about some of the kids that they feature in the book.
Well, we meet Lashy. She has a phobia of blood and hospitals,
Oh, wow.
which must be really tough for her.
Yeah.
And then there's Jess, who's constantly worrying about everything.
Oh, the worry never stops.
Never stops. We meet Kurt, who's afraid of germs and washes his hands all the time.
Compulsively.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then there's George. He's got social anxiety, really struggles to, talk to other kids. So each kid's got their own individual challenges.
Yeah.
But anxiety is the common thread that runs through all their stories.
Exactly.
And it sounds like the book shows how these same basic strategies
Right.
can be adapted for all these different kinds of anxieties.
Exactly.
It's like a set of blueprints that you can kind of customize to create the perfect anxiety-busting plan for your own kid.
That's a great way to put it. And they pepper the book with all these little tips and techniques that you can start using right away.
Oh, I love those. Give me an example.
Well, one is the detective thinking worksheet. They give you all these specific questions for kids to ask themselves.
I like that.
To challenge their anxious thoughts, like what's the evidence for this worry, or what's the worst that could happen? Could I actually handle that?
It's like they're putting their anxiety on trial.
Exactly. They also talk about the importance of positive self-talk, replacing those negative thoughts with more encouraging statements.
Give yourself a pep talk.
Exactly. And they can personalize them to fit their own fears and worries.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. It's about building up their inner resources so they can handle those anxious moments.
Yep. And one thing they emphasize is that parents have to model calm behavior.
Ooh, that's a tough one.
Right. Because kids pick up on our anxiety even when we're trying to hide it.
So we can't just talk the talk. We've got to walk the walk.
Exactly. By managing our own stress well, we're showing our kids that it's possible to deal with those tough emotions without completely losing it.
We're like their anxiety mentors,
Yeah,
showing them that it's possible to get through these challenges.
exactly.
So we were talking about how even with the best intentions, sometimes, we as parents can make our kids' anxiety worse.
Yeah, it happens to the best of us.
Right. Like that accommodating avoidance thing. Can you maybe flesh that out a bit more? What does that look like?
Sure. So let's picture a child who's really, really scared of spiders.
Oh, I know a few of those.
Right. So a well-meaning parent wanting to protect them might always get rid of any spiders in the house or avoid places where there might be spiders, doing it out of love. But
It's like they never have to actually deal with the spider.
exactly, it sends the message that spiders are just this huge threat that you always have to run away from.
So the kid never learns that maybe, just maybe, they could handle seeing a spider without, falling apart.
Right. And the book really encourages parents to gently, gently nudge their kids toward actually facing those fears.
Using those step ladders we talked about.
Exactly. It's tricky though, right? It's a balancing act. You don't want to push too hard, but you also don't want to be too protective.
Right, right. It's all about finding that sweet spot. What about, was it excessive reassurance? I think that was another one they mentioned.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. And it feels so natural, right? The kid's worried, so we say, don't worry, everything's going to be fine. But actually, over time, it can kind of backfire.
How so?
Well, because it can undermine their confidence.
You mean like their ability to handle things themselves?
Exactly. It's almost like we're saying, I don't think you can cope with this on your own.
Oh, I see.
And then, they might start to rely too much on us to make them feel better instead of developing their own ways to deal with those feelings.
So it's all about striking that balance. Again, being supportive, but not stepping in and doing all the emotional work for them.
Exactly. We got to let them build up those muscles, those coping muscles.
Okay, so we've talked about what not to do. What about the things that we should be doing? What does the book recommend in terms of, like, actively supporting an anxious child?
Well, one thing they really emphasize is the importance of modeling calm behavior ourselves.
Oh, that's so much easier said than done.
It is, but kids pick up on our anxieties, even when we're trying to hide them,
It's like they have this built-in anxiety radar.
They do. So the more we can manage our own stress in a healthy way, the better. We're giving them a good example to follow,
Right, we're showing them, hey, it's okay to feel these things, but you can get through them.
Exactly. And we don't have to pretend to be perfect either. Actually, the book says it can be helpful to even admit our own anxieties to our kids sometimes, to talk about how we handle them.
Well, that's interesting. So it's not about pretending we have it all figured out. It's about being real.
Right. And being patient.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Because, anxiety, it's often pretty ingrained. Those thought patterns, those behaviors, it takes time to change them.
It's not going to happen overnight.
No. And there will be setbacks,
Right.
But we can't get discouraged. We have to see those setbacks as opportunities to learn, to try something different next time.
It's like we're little anxiety scientists, always experimenting, always trying to find what works.
I love that analogy. It's about that growth mindset.
Yeah.
We can always learn, always get better at managing this stuff.
All right, so all of this sounds great, empowering,
Yeah.
but I bet some parents are listening and thinking, okay, where do I actually start?
Right. It can feel overwhelming.
So what does the book say about actually putting all this into practice?
Well, that's where that step-by-step part comes in. It's not just about giving you concepts. It really walks you through how to implement them. They have examples, worksheets, even scripts you can practice with your child.
Okay, so it's very concrete.
Very concrete. And they really stress the importance of adapting your approach to your specific child.
Because every kid's different. Their anxieties are different.
Exactly. So they encourage parents to get to know, really know their child's triggers, their thought patterns, their coping mechanisms, become like an anxiety expert on your own kid.
That's a great way to put it.
And then use that knowledge to build a plan, to create a plan that actually works for them.
I really like how this book combines all these different elements. You've got the research, you've got the practical guidance, you've got the real-life examples. It all comes together in a way that feels really, really helpful.
I agree.
Now, you mentioned stepladders earlier, and I'm curious to know more about how those work in practice. Can you break that down a bit more?
Sure. Remember, it's all about breaking down a big, scary fear into smaller, much more manageable steps. So if your child is terrified of dogs,
Right.
You wouldn't just throw them into a room full of puppies, right?
Right, that'd be terrifying.
Exactly. Instead, you create a stepladder with gradual exposure. Like the first step might be just looking at a picture of a dog.
Okay, so very, very gentle.
Very gentle. Then maybe watching a video of a dog playing. Then looking at a dog through a window. Each step, it builds on the last one. So they're slowly getting used to the idea of dogs.
Desensitizing them in a way.
Exactly. And at each step, you give them tons of positive reinforcement, you praise them, maybe a small reward, celebrate their bravery.
Or they're anxiety cheerleaders.
Exactly. You're making the process feel safe and supportive and encouraging. That's the key.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now, the book also talks about how social skills play a role in managing anxiety. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Of course. Social anxiety, it's really common in kids. And it can lead to all sorts of problems. Withdrawal, isolation, having trouble making friends.
It's like anxiety becomes this wall that prevents them from connecting with other people.
That's a great way to put it. And the book offers ways to break down that wall, to build those social skills step by step.
Okay, so what kind of skills are we talking about specifically?
Well, they cover a whole range from, the basics, like how to start a conversation, how to make eye contact.
Which honestly can be hard even for adults.
Oh, absolutely. But they also get into more complex things like handling conflict, dealing with teasing, standing up for yourself.
So real-life stuff that kids have to deal with all the time. What are some of the ways they recommend actually helping kids develop those skills?
One technique that really stood out to me was role-playing.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, you basically create scenarios with your child and practice different situations together. It gives them a chance to rehearse how they would react in a safe environment.
So they're not going into it completely blind. They've already kind of run through it in their heads.
Exactly. And you can make the scenarios specific to their anxieties. So let's say they're really afraid of speaking up in class.
Right.
You could role play asking the teacher a question.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Right. So then when they're actually in the classroom, it's not as scary. They've already done it before.
They've got that experience to draw on.
Exactly. Another helpful tip is to give them scripts. Like little phrases, conversation starters. It can help get over that initial awkwardness.
Like a little cheat sheet for social situations.
Exactly. Like if a kid's nervous about joining a group of kids who are already playing, they could practice saying something like, "Can I play too?" Or "What game are you playing?"
Simple, but I bet it makes a huge difference.
It really can. And the book emphasizes how important it is to reward effort. Like if they manage to make eye contact for a few seconds or start a short conversation, praise them. It all counts.
It's about celebrating those small wins.
Exactly. And as they experience more and more of those small wins, their confidence grows. And that paves the way for more social comfort and more connection.
I love that. It's such a positive approach. Now, we have to talk about teasing and bullying because, unfortunately, it's something a lot of kids have to deal with. And it can be especially hard for kids who are already dealing with anxiety.
Absolutely. And the book makes it very clear. Teasing and bullying are never okay. Kids have the right to feel safe and respected.
Absolutely. But how do we help them when it happens? I mean, sometimes just telling a child stand up for yourself isn't enough, especially if they're struggling with anxiety. What kind of specific advice does the book offer?
Well, they give kids really concrete things they can try. Like they might practice saying something assertive, like, "I don't like it when you say that. Please stop."
So they're learning to set boundaries.
Exactly. And they emphasize that being assertive doesn't have to mean being aggressive. It's about standing up for yourself in a calm and respectful way.
It's about finding that balance, not being a pushover, but also not escalating the situation.
Right. Another really important strategy they talk about is seeking support from trusted adults.
So it would be a parent, a teacher, a counselor.
Anyone the child feels comfortable talking to. Someone who can offer guidance or intervene if necessary, or just listen.
Because it's so important for kids to know they're not alone in this.
Absolutely. And parents can do a lot to create a safe space for their kids to talk about these things, to be that listening ear, that source of support.
Being that safe haven, where they know they'll be heard and believed.
Exactly. And the book also gives advice for parents on how to advocate for their child at school, how to work with teachers and administrators to address the problem.
So it's like a roadmap for navigating all of these really tricky social situations and ultimately helping your child build resilience.
That's a great way to put it. And there's so much more. We'll dive deeper into all of this as we continue exploring the book.
As we've been talking about all this stuff, I keep thinking about how this book It's not just about like fixing specific anxieties. It's like it gives these kids a whole set of skills that they can use for anything, you know?
Oh, yeah. It's way more than just a quick fix for anxiety. It's like you're giving them tools they can use for life, for handling all kinds of challenges.
Exactly. And one of the big tools they talk about is relaxation.
Relaxation, huh?
Yeah. It sounds kind of counterintuitive, right? When you think about anxiety.
Yeah, you don't usually think, oh, I'm anxious, better chill out.
Right. But they make a really good point that teaching kids how to relax is super important for managing anxiety, because when we get anxious, our body, they go into like fight or flight mode, right?
Oh, yeah. Your heart's racing, muscles tense up. You get that adrenaline surge. It's like your body's ready to run away.
Yeah, exactly. And they say relaxation techniques can actually help to counter that.
Bring your body back down from that, like, red alert state.
It's like hitting the reset button on your anxiety.
Exactly. And they give you all these different techniques that kids can learn and practice, like deep breathing is a big one.
Deep breathing, that's always a good one.
Right. It's easy. You can do it anywhere, and it really works.
Totally. What about when you just feel like anxiety's taking over your brain and you can't even think straight?
Oh, yeah, that's the worst.
Right. What do you do then?
Well, that's where they talk about problem solving.
Okay.
Because anxious kids can get stuck in this worry cycle, where they feel totally helpless.
And they can't see a way out.
Exactly. And the book, it gives them this framework, a way to break out of that cycle and actually start taking charge.
So it's not just about solving that one problem. It's about giving them a process they can use over and over again.
Right. So the first step is actually identifying the problem, which sounds easy, but it's actually really hard when you're anxious.
Yeah, your thoughts are all jumbled up.
Right. Then you brainstorm solutions, like you make a list of possible things you could do.
And then you kind of weigh the pros and cons of each one.
Exactly. And you pick the solution that seems like it'll work best, and you try it out. And here's the really important part. You evaluate how it went.
So you're not just doing things randomly. You're learning from each attempt.
Exactly. It's like you're becoming a scientist of your own anxiety.
I love that. And it seems like all of this, the relaxation, the problem solving, the step ladders we talked about, it's all about giving kids a sense of control.
Absolutely. Instead of feeling like anxiety is this big, scary monster that's running their lives.
Or learning that they have the power to fight back.
Exactly. They're building their own anxiety-busting superpowers.
And we as parents, we're like their sidekicks.
I like that. We're there to cheer them on, provide support, and create that safe space for them to practice these new skills.
It's about helping them believe in themselves.
Yes. And one thing the book really stresses is that you don't have to be perfect as a parent.
Oh, thank goodness.
I know, right? Just being there for your child, listening without judging and celebrating their efforts, that's what really matters.
It's about connection.
Exactly. And sometimes, you might need extra help, and that's totally okay.
Like seeing a therapist.
Right. If you're feeling overwhelmed or if your child's anxiety is really impacting their life, a therapist can be amazing.
Absolutely. There's no shame in getting professional help.
None at all. So the big takeaway here is that anxiety, it's a normal part of being a kid.
It's not something to be afraid of.
Nope. And with the right tools and the right support, every kid can learn to manage it and live a happy, healthy life.
Well, this has been a really fascinating deep dive.
It has.
And I think we've all learned a lot from helping your anxious child. But now I want to hear from you guys. What resonated with you? What are your thoughts? Leave us a comment below.
And tell us what book you want us to explore next.
We're always looking for new adventures in knowledge. Don't forget to like this episode and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives on all kinds of interesting topics. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep those suggestions coming.